This is a Hearthstone to Duelyst guide. However, if you've not played Hearthstone, you'll still learn quite a bit. So basically the entirety of this is terms and phrases that I'm going to be explaining and helping make the transition or just learning for the first time. So let's start with aggro. It's Initiator. It seeks to fight first and play progressively better cards each turn. Warriors and Zoo Warlock from Hearthstone are similar to Linar and Vanar in that they seek to control the early game and carry that through the end. Control seeks to survive early and put huge threats down late game. Generally, Mages and Draxus Warlock decks fell into this archetype from Hearthstone. In Duelyst, Vitruvian best suits this. His early game is fairly weak, but come mid to late game, he is a force to be reckoned with. Although to a certain extent, every class in the game has terrifyingly strong late game cards that could win the game in a couple turns, even when losing. Mid-range, it's a mix between the previous. It's kind of a standard playstyle somewhat. Most decks from both games fall generally into this archetype. Combo requires careful setup and probably a bit of luck. Oil Rogue is a prime example. Similarly, Songhai's one-turn knockout decks play in a very similar fashion. Tempo, outpace your opponent with big plays. Druid, with his mana providing cards to get out big threats, are incredibly similar to how Magmar plays. The difference being, Magmar's cards are generally more powerful, but require sacrifice in some form or fashion, typically health. Board wipes. Removal in Duelyst is much more prevalent than in Hearthstone. Cards like Linar's Tempest are eerily reminiscent of Warlock's Hellfire. Every class has some form of a board wipe. Bounce. Return a minion to its owner's hand. Very few instances in Duelyst, notably Vanar. Having a card set back to your hand in Duelyst hurts a lot more since you can only have 6 in your hand at any time. Burn or ping. Deal a certain amount of damage. Similarly with board wipes, Duelyst has many more damaging cards. Every class has access to some. Cantrip. Draw a card. Baseline card draw is pretty rare in both, but since you can replace a card every turn, that's sort of like drawing a card anyway. Clock. How long until you can kill an opponent? Every turn is much more fluid in Hearthstone, so in Duelyst expect to be a bit more off most of the time. Mana curve. Since you have more cards, less mana, less cards in hand, and less turns to play, a good mana curve is more important than ever. As the name suggests, your curve should hump around the 2 or 3 mana point. Filtering. Pick and choose your cards for your hand. Duelyst allows you to replace a card every turn, so you'll be filtering a lot. Conversely in Hearthstone, where it is extremely rare. Mulligan. Replace cards in your starting hand for new ones. Virtually similar in both. Notably, the second player does not draw an additional card for which to mulligan. Synergy. Cards that inherently help each other or grant additional bonuses in general. In both games, synergy is quite common. In Hearthstone, it's Pirate or Murloc decks. In Duelyst, it's Arcanist minions. Top deck. Options exhausted to a point when the next card drawn makes or breaks you. Very rarely does Duelyst come down to top decking, since you draw 2 cards a turn and can mulligan 1, as opposed to Hearthstone, where late game top decking is fairly common. Vanilla test. Determine whether or not a card is good by removing its effect text and solely focusing on the stat line compared to the mana cost. Many cards in Hearthstone can be effectively vanilla tested. However, in Duelyst, many of the cards have much greater effects, rendering the vanilla test less effective. In a similar vein, vanilla cards are those without any text by default. Card advantage. The sum of cards on the board, deck, hand, and general effectiveness thereof. Since players can quickly reach the cap of 6 cards in hand, and the difference between low and high value minions is such that card advantage is difficult to implement in most games. Notably, if certain classes like Burn or OTK Songhai, or Oil Rogue, have a low number of cards in your hand, you can be pretty sure you're winning. Expected value. The chance of a certain predicted outcome becoming reality. Since Duelyst has the mulligan mechanic, it's not often you'll have to consider expected value. Similarly, there is much less randomness. AoE, Area of Effect Damage. Mostly synonymous with board wipe. Certain cards in Duelyst have the keyword around, which only affects minions or generals around a single space. Bomb, a card that must be dealt with or the game will end. Many of the high mana cost cards in Duelyst are bombs. However, in Hearthstone, only certain legendaries even fall under this category. Face, taking direct damage to or from another minion or hero. In Hearthstone, simply attacking the enemy hero is going face. The same can be said in Duelyst. Similarly, weapons in Hearthstone and in general in Duelyst, both can attack with their face into the enemy minions or general. Mill, force your opponent to burn cards by overdrawing. A popular gimmick deck in Hearthstone, but nearly non-existent in Duelyst. Nerf, unlike Blizzard, Counterplay Games seeks to balance their cards every few weeks as needed. Net deck, using someone else's card list, pretty much the same in both games. OTK, one hit or turn knockout. Both Hearthstone's Oil Rogue and Lantern Fox Songhai fall in this category. At least it used to. Lantern Fox recently got a pretty huge nerf, but Songhai can still pull off one hit KOs. Ramp, increasing the amount of mana usable either temporarily or permanently, common to the Hearthstone Druid but nearly non-existent in Duelyst. Notably, mana crystals on the field and certain Vanar cards apply. RNG, random number generator, essentially random results. Common and frequently criticized in Hearthstone, nearly non-existent in Duelyst. Cards that do have RNG in Duelyst are either not used or criticized in themselves. Token, minions generated from other cards, not a part of the deck list. Each game has their own set of tokens. Vanar, Abyssine, and Vitruvian use tokens quite frequently. Value, synonymous with favorable trading, getting a disproportionate amount of worth from a single card or play. Both games rely on value to pull ahead. BM, bad-mannered. You can spam emotes and or pull unsportsmanlike moves in both. Both can also be muted or surrendered to at any time. Cancer. I hate this term, but it usually refers to any popular card, deck, playstyle, series of plays that is annoying or overpowered. Both games, of course, have seen this term used, although currently not frequently seen in Duelyst. Lethal. Having the damage necessary to win the game. A drop. A minion played from hand. For example, "Aw man, I wish I had more 2-drops." Early, mid, late game. It describes the section of the game that you're in turn-wise. In Duelyst, since mana is capped at 8, early game usually refers only to the first couple turns, as opposed to nearly double that in Hearthstone. Mid-game in Duelyst is around turns 4 to 6-ish, with late game being around turn 7+. Hearthstone follows a few turns later. In other words, late game in Hearthstone would be more like 8 or 9+. Hero or General refers to a single character representing a deck. For example, a Warrior deck from Hearthstone or Lionar from Duelyst. Metagame, popular strategy, cards, playstyles, etc. Both games are under the influence of the metagame. MMR, hidden ranking. In both games, you'll have matches with players of similar skill or rank. It's much more stringent in Hearthstone right now, as it has a much more massive player base. Rush or Charge, attack or move on the same turn played. Rush and Charge are terms from Duelyst, Hearthstone, respectively. Wind Fury, Celerity, attack and or move twice in one turn. Wind Fury / Celerity are terms from Hearthstone, Duelyst, respectively. Dust, currency acquired from disenchanting or breaking down cards, can be used to craft new cards. Applies to both. A quest, daily doses of gold for doing something, usually for playing a certain class. Applies to both. Arena / Gauntlet, draft cards until you have a full deck, then play until you lose 3 times. Capped at 12 with incrementally increasing rewards, including cards, packs, and dust. Applies to both. Gold, used to purchase Arena or Gauntlet modes, also used to buy packs. Death Rattle, Dying Wish, an additional effect takes place upon the minion dying. Hearthstone, Duelyst, respectively. Deck Hand, 40 cards in deck and 6 cards in hand for Duelyst. 30 cards in deck and 10 cards in hand for Hearthstone. Fatigue, both games have the effect of taking damage when there are no cards left to draw. Mana, the constraint of cards to be played. HP, attack, and toughness, the amount of damage taken, doled, or received. Upon 0 HP, the unit dies, or in the case of a general / hero, the game ends. Rarity, common, uncommon, rare, epic, legendary. Unmarked, silver, blue, pink, red. Higher tiered cards usually are better, but sometimes more difficult to obtain. In Duelyst, rare cards have a significantly higher chance to drop in card packs. Packs. Purchase with gold to get 5 cards of varying classes and rarities. Taunt/provoke. Card that must be attacked. Applies to both. Notably, Duelyst Provoke also stops enemy units from moving. Tribe/subtype. A special classification for certain units. Typically comes with synergetic effects. For example, Murlocs from Hearthstone or Arcanist minions from Duelyst. Here's more broader terms or phrases. Life or cards. Typically expending health to gain board control is optimal. Overpowered cards. Cards that should be nerfed or widely used. Notably cards like Dr. Boom and Keeper of the Veil right now. A common question is what to craft first. And that means just what are the cards that work with many playstyles or incredibly overpowered. Check out the subreddits for this specific resource. As a jumping off point, pick a class or two and pick some cards that fall in line with your playstyle. Target uncommons and rares until you know what legendaries you want. Iconic cards. Cards that players recognize or use. In Hearthstone, it's like Dr. Boom, Tyranian Foldering, Deathwing, Ragnaros, etc. In Duelyst, there's a bit less of that since, as of right now, there's no lore backing up these cards. The best general? It changes with the meta. Every class has seen competitive play and is seen in all throughout the ladder. Although Druid, Warrior, and Warlock are often seen in Hearthstone, as is Songhai, Vitruvian, and Magmar for Duelyst. Arena or packs? Similar to Hearthstone, once you get to a certain level of knowledge of each class, you can go into Arena quite confident on a return of investment. As it is, many of the terms and strategies do carry over, so it probably won't take too long. Is it better to go first or second? It doesn't make a huge difference in either game, but it should be noted to change up your strategy. In Hearthstone, the second player plays a card a turn behind, but gets an additional card plus a mana coin. You don't get the card draw or the coin in Duelyst. However, on the board are mana crystals and you are one space closer to it. What should I play in Duelyst? Now, while I've played every class from both games, I haven't brought over half of those to the extreme that they need to be an expert. So it's more, take this as more of a general guideline. So Lionar is a paladin looking fellow with a key component Zeal, meaning he wants a few beefy units around him at all times. He tries to win by out-healing burst and sustaining through constant favorable trading. Also trades HP for board control quite often. Warriors and priests will probably like this class best. Songhai favors large amounts of burst or carefully planned out unit placement for completely one-sided trading. Rogues will love the comboing and hunters the rushing. Vitruvian is pretty unique. Parts of it are sticky minions that spawn more minions. Some of it relies on buffing other minions or comboing. Sometimes it's controlling through ranged. It's very tricky to nail down. He doesn't have just one general playstyle, so because of that, there's not really a direct comparison. Abyssian also likes to burst with combos, has a nice steady curve throughout the game, prefers to use spells in a limited amount of buffed minions or tokens. Mages and warlocks are fairly similar. Magmar is the big beefy dude that is incredibly tricky to kill or even outvalue. Also tries to frequently out-tempo the opponent. Zoo warlocks and druids will love Magmar. And finally Vanar, another hard to nail down general with no direct comparison. She's unique to Duelyst in that a lot of her cards interact with the board, like Infiltrate. I suppose Shaman would best fit here, but it's not certain. The last major component of Duelyst as opposed to Hearthstone is of course the addition of the board. Now, it's far too much to simply tack onto the end of this video, but keep an ear to the ground for a general purpose guide for that in the future. So you've checked out this vid, thank you, but make sure to check out some of the other videos including a full playlist for the challenges, casual commentary, and VOD reviews. Also in the description will be some vital information such as deck list, tournament information, the subreddit, and a few Duelyst producers that I watch. Notably, Trump from Hearthstone has picked up Duelyst on the regular now. Make sure to check him out in particular.